this is Lee back once again for another video. And this time I'm going to be doing something a little bit extra special. This is kind of a preview of it. But I want to talk about a video game. Yes, a wrestling video game called WWE 2K16. That's right. This game, and I have the digital versatile disc here, as you can see there. This game, which I have not purchased, no, I didn't steal it, this is a rental. Haha, I rented a game, yes. That they still do that, believe it or not. And back in the day, of course, you had to go to the video store. Those do exist. And you pick out your video, and you would check it out for a few days, and then rush to bring it back. Of course, you try to get as far as you can in the game. Some games are so short, you play them and think, well, I'm glad I didn't spend, $60 on that, and you return to the store. But anyway, I found this service, and of course this is not an advertisement. I didn't get anything from this company. I didn't get paid, nothing like that, and I don't want to be paid by them. I want to give you my honest opinion, uninhibited by promotions and things like that. But this is GameFly. If you've ever heard of that, it's basically a gaming version of Netflix. You check out online, of course, the game that you want, and you get it in the mail after a few days, from your queue, as it were, and you play it or whatever, and of course, pop it back in the mail in the prepaid envelope, and get the next one, and so on. So I got my little free trial or whatever, and the first game that I got was WWE 2K16, so there's the proof that I have it, not permanently, but for now. So anyway, I want to talk about this game a bit, and give you some impressions. So basically, I was a big fan of WWE SmackDown vs. Raw 2006 for the PlayStation 2. Now this was a game, of course, I had done some research on because I thought, well, I haven't played any wrestling games since my childhood. These were those easy games where you basically just smack a bunch of buttons as fast as you can, and you win. Yay! But I got to play as Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior and the Undertaker and all these other characters, and Jake the Snake Roberts and Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Sergeant Slaughter. That was then. That was WrestleFest. That was Superstars. Those were these old arcade games. Even on the home systems, the Super Nintendo and all that, you just basically hit a bunch of buttons for the most part. That's what North American fans had to expect from wrestling games, and so kind of when you hear about it, you think, who cares? It doesn't require any skill or talent. It's always the same thing. Well, wrestling games have come a long way. Now, of course, in Japan, you had the Fire Pro Wrestling Series. You had many other wrestling games which were based on timing. I'm going to time this move exactly right, and I'm going to time the reversal. I'm going to, do this combination. And it was very skillful. Now, of course, you had an attempt to break out of the North American mold with the WWF WrestleMania arcade game, which was basically Mortal Kombat in a ring with wrestling characters that were digitized. Now, of course, that was not to everyone's liking, to do the little combinations, little super move combinations. Well, the WWE 2K games got me hooked again because I went from 2006 where there was a lot of button mashing. You could win by basically setting your turbo controller and just kind of holding the buttons down. You'd reverse just about everything. You win just about everything. Of course, I was playing offline, but still. And the load times in the game were horrendous. You could create a variety of characters, and basically half the game was wrestling, more like fighting. You choose your 3D characters, and you fight in a ring, and beat your opponent down, and pin them, or force them to give up, and there you go. But the other half of the game was creations. You can customize the textures that you put on the wrestler's body. You can change the shape of the body, the skin color, you can put clothing, all the different articles, give them a name, modify the entrance. So you basically create your own wrestler. And it's quite fun. Some people like to create themselves in the game. Other people like to create, famous characters, other wrestlers from the real world that maybe aren't part of the game roster, because this was, the wrestlers that were popular in 2005. But this little storyline. Anyway, that game was fun. Some people really like, WWF or E, SmackDown, Here Comes the Pain, but I've not played that game. That's kind of older in the series. It started with WWF SmackDown, of course back when that brand was popular in the television program, and there was WWF Raw, and Raw 2, SmackDown 2, and of course SmackDown Here Comes the Pain, Shut Your Mouth, that's the title of the game, and many others. But you finally get to WWE 2K14, which is the sequel to WWE 13. Now 13 was, for many fans, the pinnacle of the series. But it was the last one that was done by Ukes THQ. After that, 2K, which was known as a sports game company doing the NBA 2K, they took over. Well, anyway, 2K14 was highly praised because it finally allowed, many features that fans had been demanding, like the ability to modify an arena, not just the ring itself, but changed kind of the architecture of the ring. So anyway, I got 2K14, loved it, played it for almost a year, and unfortunately, they 2K Games, of course, who purchased the license or engine or whatever, they basically shut the games down every 2 years. It's a terrible system, I'd say, because it discourages innovation. Because all they have to do is shut the game down and re-release it. Not much has changed, and you pay $60 just to keep playing online. Kind of a disappointment. But back to the series. So 2K14, played it a lot, loved it. I haven't posted a full review yet, but I want to give you my impressions of 2K16. Now, if you played 2K14, now I have not played 2K15 yet, but I will in the near future, and I'm going to compare all three games together. But let's talk about 16. Now, there have been a lot of reviews out there. So WWE 2K16 there, which I've rented. This game, if I've only played 2K14 before this, and of course I rented this game, and I can tell you right away my impressions. Now, the single player is a whole nother story. Of course, in 14 you had 30 years of WrestleMania, more like 29 years, a single-player experience, and you had the, of course, many classic wrestlers, different objectives in each mission, if it were. You control, the Ultimate Warrior against Hulk Hogan, and you had to do certain things. You had to, body slam him at a certain point. He'd get his health down to a certain level, do a certain move at a certain time. And it went on, of course, but there was Beat the Streak mode, where you fought against a very powerful version of The Undertaker, very unfair, advantage, and see if you could beat his streak, his winning streak. He'd won all these WrestleMania matches, and he was rarely ever seen, but he would come on the stage and, beat someone, and everyone would go, wow, he's unbeatable. Well, of course, eventually we know in history, eventually Brock Lesnar defeated him. WrestleMania 30, so of course they seem to have known ahead of time what was going to happen, but you get to choose how you beat The Undertaker. And of course you can play as The Undertaker and defend the streak against a series of opponents, but that's all single player in 2K14. In 2K15 and 16, of course, the single player has changed. Now, with 2K16, it is a much more personal story about Stone Cold Steve Austin. And it basically begins where he fought Jake the Snake Roberts, and he became, this heel, this bully, this savage, this mean, nasty person. But of course, everybody loved him, so it didn't matter. But anyway, Stone Cold Steve Austin, that's single player. I don't actually care that much about it, because with these types of games, you can get the game, and you can play the single player anytime you want. But the clock is ticking. 2K14, 2K15, 2K16. 2K14 is no longer online. After 2 years, they canceled the online portion of the game. So no more online play, no more community creations. Well, 15 is still alive for at least a year. But 2K16, of course, came out October 27th, I believe it was, 30th, probably in the rest of the world. So anyway, the game has only been out a short time. Here it is, November 18th, 2015. So the community is very small. And when I started playing this game, I thought, okay, well, let's see here. The menus are different. 14 had these bright red, menus, and of course they're very stylized, very fancy, compared to previous games in the series, going back to 2006, they were just kind of these bland, black background and kind of, square boxes and, highlighted in blue or whatever, or white. But then they had these fancy, kind of, beveled edges and, these little animations. Well, 2K15 made it all gray, very boring. 2K16 kind of pizzazzes it up with these little circular white lights, kind of forms a little grid, black and white, which does make a little bit of a difference when you're creating your characters. You can kind of line it up to little grids and see a little better, but otherwise it's just a visual theme. That's it. The menus are the same, the options are the same. Let me tell you what's been added. Well, when you go into the creation suite, of course, the custom creations, community creations is tied to that. You can create your own wrestler and everything and upload it. Well, this has changed. And some of these changes were from 2K15. Now remember, I'm talking about the Xbox 360 versions here. Now, when you go into the creation suite, if you want to create, let's see, body art, for example, basically you'll put in a decal on the wrestler's gear or skin, and you get these different logos. The WWE logos, of course the WWE logo itself looks different. They've added that new logo. It's not the kind of, crisscross. It's very straight up and down, the two W's. So they've added some different logos that you can do, mostly related to Stone Cold Steve Austin, also HBK, and of course the new logo. So there's a couple new designs there. That's it. Otherwise, everything is the same. All the little items of clothing you can put on your wrestler are the same. All the body types, everything. Now, when you go into the templates, you have a couple of different wrestlers, a couple of new wrestlers that were added to the roster, and some subtracted. Hulk Hogan, of course, is no longer in the game officially. But anyway, very little has changed. It's basically the same thing that you had before. Now there's a feature that's different, and this is also present in 2K15, which is that if you go online, now in 14, you could go onto Community Creations, with of course your Xbox Live Gold account, and in 14 you had to buy an online pass for $10 if you got the game used, because the code wouldn't work. You only got a 7-day free trial, and that only allowed you to play matches, not to upload or download, creations. So it was kind of unfortunate. But in 2K15, there's no online pass. So you can just buy the game and just go right online, as you should be able to. That's every other game does it that way. They don't have this extra layer of subscription that you have to have to make extra money. But 16 is the same way, so thankfully when I got my rented game, I could go right online and play. I didn't have to enter any codes or anything like that. But with the community creations, in 15 and 16 there's a limitation. You can download 20 items every 24 hours, and there's a little clock that ticks, and so then you can download 20 more. It's a great annoyance, because of course I just went crazy with 14, downloading arenas and superstars and logos and movesets. Well, and some things have been removed. You can no longer create your own special move in 16. You can use custom soundtracks for your wrestler entrance. You can rip a CD that you've put into your Xbox 360, rip the track and put it in there. You can no longer create a story. Unfortunately, that's been removed. So those features are missing. But you can create a championship belt if you want. You can't use it online, of course, but you can still create a championship belt. You can create an arena. And all that really means is they have several preset arenas, and there's a few that have been added that weren't there before, but very few changes. And basically you can change the color and the texture of just about everything in the arena. It's kind of like Superstar Threads, which of course hasn't changed, where you take, a pre-existing wrestler and you say, well, I want his bandana to be a different color, I want his vest to be a different color, I want his boots to be a different color, and you save it as an alternate attire. Well, it's kind of like you're doing that with the arenas, but you get a little more freedom because you can place textures on the ring, on the posts, on the sides, the turnbuckles. You can change with the color of the announce table. You can change with textures on the ramp, the entrance ramp. You can change the color of the lighting, so you can pick bright green lights if you want, which I like. You can make it darker. You can choose the size of the crowd. But not a lot of choices. You can't, it's not like a construction set where you can actually, build the architecture, unfortunately. So you can just take an existing building and kind of just rearrange things just a little bit. But it's way more design than you had in the past. I think 13 was the first one that introduced this. Well, in 16, of course, you can create these arenas. You can create the superstars and, of course, the divas. Some people were saying you can't create divas, but, of course, in the 360 versions, you always could. That's only the next-gen versions that had those limitations. But let's say you want to upload something you've created. You can only upload 5 things. So you get 20 things you download, 5 that you upload. And it gives you little slots, 5 slots. And you start out at bronze rank. I said, ranks? What are ranks doing in creations? Well, apparently, what you have to do is you upload a bunch of stuff, and you get your friends to download them. And as soon as they get enough downloads, they upgrade your rank from bronze, I suppose, to silver, gold. But the highest rank is diamond. Can you make it to diamond, they say. And I don't know how hard it is to do that. But I guess if you had a dedicated team of friends, hey, download my stuff. Give it a... I don't even know if they need to give it a rating, but just download my stuff so I can go up in rank. And you just keep doing that until you've got, enough. And I'm not sure what the maximum are. I mean, you can download up to 100 created wrestlers, 100 slots, but you only download 20 a day. Kind of annoying. And you can upload only 5 things. Of course, you could upload to your heart's content in 2K14, so it's a shame that that's gone. So that limitation is in 15 and 16. Very annoying. I suppose they were trying to make it easier for them to regulate the material. But you think about it, in 2K14, after 2 years, there were 5,000 pages. Not individual items, but pages. Each page has maybe 20, 50 items. Created textures and superstars and arenas and so forth, and stories. So we no longer have the stories. And just looking at the created content, I see many famous wrestlers, many people have recreated what was in past games, and the quality is just not there. I'm sorry to say it, but the quality of the skill that really these creators had perfected the craft. A lot of the wrestlers you could download in 14 were just as good as the ones in the default roster. Now, the graphics have been improved just ever so slightly in 2K16, and I assume this is just a carryover from 15. So from 14 to 15, the graphics were just slightly improved on the Xbox 360. There's just a little bit more shine, a little bit more polish, a little bit more, fine detail. And you can really only see it when you look really close to these wrestlers. And it's only the wrestlers. I really don't notice it in anything else in the game. Nothing else really looks different. But just graphics just slightly better. Now, for a long time in the series, of course, the created wrestlers never looked anywhere near as good as the wrestlers you could play as. So you get, this very detailed, Hulk Hogan coming out, and you want to fight against Sting, and Sting looks like this goofy cartoon character. Barely looks like him. It looks like a fan kind of threw some paint on and dressed up as him. It doesn't really look like another wrestler. Well, now in the series, you can really create a character that looks almost exactly how they should. So now you had fan versions of Paige, for example, in 2K14 that looked very, very good. Very close to the real person, in a gamey kind of way, if that makes sense. But by the time you get to 15 and 16, of course, you get an official version of Paige. And the official version of Paige really doesn't look that much better. If you look at the face, you can see, okay, the facial features are, exact, photo, identical. But otherwise, it looks pretty much the same. So those editors really had perfected their craft, but in the new game, a lot of these editors just haven't migrated over, and the ones that have started maybe haven't worked their way up. But they're using the exact same tools as before. But imagine if you spent, so many hours creating all these characters, and then they shut the game down, and the new game comes out, and you recreate them again, and that game gets shut down, you can recreate it again. How much energy do these editors have to keep creating stuff? So I'm tempted to just go back to 14 and kind of like look at the attributes, the values, the variables of each of these wrestlers and kind of just recreate it in the new game. And of course I've created some of my own characters already, but I'm so limited in what I can do. So I've kind of rambled on a bit about the creation suite, but that's half the game right there. Gameplay-wise, everything is the same as I remember. The grappling system is the same. You grapple somebody, and then you can press a button at a certain time, and a little white thing appears above the person's head, and they can press the right trigger. And if they do it too fast or too late, then the move, hits them, and that's it. But if you hit it at the right time, it says reverse, and you hit them back, or you reverse the move. It's the same thing. The submission system, you grab somebody in a submission hold, you hold down the A button, and then you tap the buttons fast. One of the few times that you actually have to do that. A breaking point submission appears on the screen, you gotta fill up the bar. And the other person hits the buttons fast. It's the same thing. In 14, in 15, and 16, identical. Nothing has changed. With the pin system, of course, you pin somebody on the mat. 1, 2, 3. There's a little bar that you have to hold down the A button and then release it in a little target zone. And of course the target zone gets smaller as they get more beat up. And of course online with lag, sometimes it moves too fast, or it moves too slow, or you'll even get it in there perfectly and it just won't count. It's very annoying. But all of that's the same in 16 as in 14. Exactly the same. Nothing has changed. Now, when you get someone in a chain grapple, so at the beginning of the match you do the collar and elbow tie-up, and you hit the A button fast, another button mashing session, and usually whoever's stronger just immediately does the move, and they get basically a free hit on their opponent very cheap, but there you go. Of course when you are holding someone, the animation, you're kind of like holding on to them, and you can move the joystick, so you flip them around, you're holding their arm, you're holding their torso, you're holding their head, and then you can do different libraries of moves at that point. So you get the move that you want, and of course they have the chance to reverse it with a button. That's all the same in 14 and 15 and 16. Now the next gen versions, they talked about all this stuff about how you gotta put the circle in the circle and you gotta find the sweet spot. That's not there. It's all identical to 14 and 15. This is 16. It's the same game. That's really the review. It could have been a 30-second review. It's the same game. All they changed was the roster, the menus, and the single-player experience. That's about it. I mean, there's a couple minor changes, a few extra logos and creations, a few wrestlers were, of course, added and removed. Some of the animations are different. I actually don't like some of the new animations because, let's say, you have an established character, and you do a certain move, like Stone Cold Steve Austin. That's a perfect example. He's the title character, You take him, and what you do with him is you grab your opponent and you do the Stone Cold Stunner, his famous move that he's so famous for. Well, in 14, of course, he kind of kicks them in this midsection. He turns around, he kind of grabs their head with his arm, and he basically just falls down on his bottom on the mat, and then the person kind of snaps back as if all the momentum has been, channeled to their body, and they fly back. It's the Stunner, woo! Of course, it's a wrestling move, so it's fake, but there you go. But of course, Stone Cold Steve Austin was famous for this. So he does the Stunner, and so his opponent falls to the mat, apparently hitting their head, or slamming their body, and they fall backwards, and then they fall flat on their face. But then there's an extra animation where the body like flips up and flops like a fish. And at first I thought that was so comical. Someone pointed it out to me, and I can never unsee it. Every time I see it, it's boom, flop. But that's how it is. And if you watch the Attitude Era, WWF, not E, but F, wrestling matches where Stone Cold, Steve Austin goes in and he does the stun on someone, most of the time they flop after the move. So that's on authentic animation. It's silly, but it's authentic. Well, in 14, it was present. In 16, I, created a Stone Cold, variation character. And I noticed the stunner, there's 2 Stone Cold stunners you can choose from. They don't have the little flop. There's one where he stuns them, and there's another where he stuns them and he does the middle fingers, which are not censored this time. Before, there was a little mosaic box in front of them. But in 16, it's no longer there. So kids, don't try this at home. You may get punched in the face. But anyway, so the stunner doesn't have the floppy animation. And a lot of the moves I noticed, you'll press the button and you'll see this kind of slow, methodical animation of the wrestlers, slamming each other to the mat. I suppose they were going for more realism, very slow and methodical, but it looks kind of silly. In 14, it was very fast and fluid. Imagine playing Street Fighter. You have these fast, fluid moves. Boom, boom, boom. It's just one to another. Well, it's almost like stop. Okay, now we're doing this move. And that isn't true of every move, but I've noticed it for a lot of moves in 2K16. So I guess aesthetically, that takes some getting used to. If you've played so much 14 as I have, and then transitioning into a new animation style. Now, some players have said that the targeting in the game is a little bit off. Like, let's say you have 6 wrestlers in the ring, as you can online, of course. There's no new game modes. But there's 6 wrestlers in the ring, and you're trying to grab a specific one, to get him in a headlock or something. It seems a little hard to get it right. Some of it may be due, of course, to lag, the individual player's skill and all that sort of thing. But it seems just a little bit harder. And I'm not sure if it's my imagination or if it really is different. And the reversals, it looks like they've tweaked it just a little bit. Sometimes it's easier to reverse, sometimes it's harder. Of course, the stats of the wrestlers have all been changed. So some wrestlers are weaker than they were before, others are stronger. They're trying to seek balance, I suppose. But you get wrestlers that are down to 78 or 79 in the male wrestlers, and the female wrestlers going down to 74, but also up to 84. Before, you only had 79. Of course, that's changed in every game. John Cena is 96. Before, he was 94. So, of course, they're popular wrestlers. They, of course, make a little bit stronger just to sort of promote them in the game. But there you go. So, basically, 2K16 is the same as 14 and 15, except what I've mentioned. The multiplayer is about the same that I've noticed. Of course, you have the ranked matches, which I think are more fun. That seems to be where most people are playing. There's, of course, the player matches, where you have a couple more options. You can do special referees matches. You can do with managers. You can have you can get together with a friend and go against a team of AI, computer-controlled characters. In ranked matches, of course, every team has to have at least one human player. Of course, you can use AI. But really, it's the same as it always was. You have the fair fight option, where every custom stuff is completely turned off, and it's just one-on-one in a regular normal match. And of course, you get the fair fight weekly and the leaderboards to see who's won the most fair fights or lost the most fair fights. Of course, the leaderboards are the same. The top 2 or 3 wrestling character players, the gamer tags. It's very obvious that they've cheated to get where they got to. They call it boosting. Basically, you get online and you get your friends together and you say, okay, we're going to have a handicap match, me versus the 3 of you. And you guys are just going to stand there and let me beat you up and get all the points. Sound good? Okay, great. And then they just do that for 20 or 30 hours, whatever it is. And then they've got, 9,999,999 points. Yay! Number 1 on the leaderboards. No one can ever beat them. Hall of Fame. That's called boosting. It's cheating. You're supposed to report that, but there's these certain guys. Hostility is the name of the one of them. It's pretty obvious that that's what he's done he or she, in each of these games. Get number 1. The game is barely out, and of course it's much easier because hardly anyone plays at first. So you just get together with your friends and boost your way to the top. So when you look at the leaderboards, it's a bit deceiving. The top players didn't really earn it. Of course, there's also hacks, cheats. In all of these online games, of course, there's ways to manipulate the game, unfortunately. And, of course, many people know how but refuse to do it because it's just unsportsmanlike. But other players, they're very sneaky. But some of these cheats that you can freeze your opponent. So you get them in a pin, and there's no way they can get out. because it fools the system into thinking it's a different move. Now, in some matches, it doesn't really help you because you freeze the person, 1, 2, 3, and they're pinned, but let's say it's an elimination chamber. The match has to continue, and so you just have these frozen players just sitting there. And they've ruined the game now because it can never end. So it's quite an annoying thing to do, and some people troll other people. They spend money and time to try to annoy and ruin the games of others. It's silly, but every online game has that, unfortunately. So I haven't noticed it as much in 16, but it may be just because it's a newer game and I haven't played it enough to really see that. But I'm sure eventually that will happen. And if 2K is smart, they will try to regulate that. But it seemed like they didn't do much of it in 14. It was just more of an honor system. You just had to avoid those players or gang up on them or just berate them in messages, tell them not to do that. And some players, I'd meet and they would cheat, and I would just kind of talk to them and say, well, why don't we just have a real match? How about that? And they say, okay, fine. But some people are just looking to waste other people's time. Other people just don't have any skill, and they think, oh, this is a shortcut. But it's a game. It's fun. So I like 16. It's fun to play, but it's sort of like the good news is it's the same. The bad news is it's the same. So if you enjoyed 14, there's a few things that will annoy you about 16. Certainly a couple missing features, a couple added, items, but very, very small, hardly noticeable. Once you get past the single-player aspect of it, it's really the same game as before, as 15 and 16. But, of course, I'll be playing 15 hopefully within a week, and I can really get down and compare it, because 15 was a game that was bashed by fans, bashed by critics, bashed by me, because I'd heard so much bad press about it. But I'm really concerned about the online experience. What is the online experience really like in 15? And since I played 16, I imagine it's very, very similar. So we'll see. We'll see. But anyway, so that's about what I have to say about WWE 2K16 for the 360. Soon I'll be making a sort of a three-way, a review of the series 14, 15, 16, and I'll tell you my thoughts on that. I'm really looking forward to playing some more online. Of course, I met many wonderful players in my experience in 14, and I've already met some neat ones in 16, but hardly anyone has the game yet. I think most people have gone to the Xbox One and the PS4, but really they're like two totally different games. So ignore what you've heard in the press. I'll give you the real story shortly. And I apologize for anyone I misled with my rant, because really when people talk about 2K15 and 2K16, 99% of the time they're talking about the next-gen versions. They're not talking about the 360 or the PS3. So of course I can only speak for the 360, but I'll set the record straight. And I'll apologize where I'm wrong. I'll correct myself. So I appreciate, feedback from others, those who have encouraged me to try these games out and give them a fair shot. But really, it's the same thing as you've seen before. So there you go. So if you were on the fence about one of these games, now you know. 16 is just as in its infancy. Within a year, if it's all still online, if it's still afloat, watch your 360 news. If it's still going, I'm sure it'll be a lot better than it is now. There may be more cheaters, but there'll be a lot better community creation content. I mean, when I got 14, that was the big selling point. I saw there were hundreds of wrestlers and custom arenas I knew I wanted to get, and so that was a great deal. So anyway, but do you really want to spend, $45 on a game that has, a thousandth of the content? So I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.